What happens when a black CEO goes undercover to his own truck company and then stops cold when he hears two white customers behind him? If you believe in what's right, in treating people fairly, no matter the color of their skin, hit that subscribe button and join the movement. Only those who do not care for justice will refuse to subscribe. Now, let us begin. Marcus Bennett walked into Bennett Trucks and Motors, but no one recognized him. That was exactly how he wanted it. Gone was the sharp, powerful image of the CEO of one of the largest truck dealerships in the state. No tailored suits, no polished shoes, no expensive watches. He looked like any other middle-class man. A simple light blue plain t-shirt, loose-fitting and casual, paired with well-worn jeans that had just enough fading to look like they had seen years of use. His heavy, muscular build made him stand out, but not in the way people were used to. No one saw him as their boss today. His usual, perfectly groomed beard? Gone. His face was clean-shaven, making him look a few years younger than his late 30s. His short black hair, always neatly trimmed, had been grown out slightly and left unstyled. Even his accessories had changed. His usual luxury watch was replaced with a simple black rubber-strapped one, something that blended in rather than made a statement. His shoes weren't the polished leather dress shoes he was used to, but a pair of basic black sneakers, slightly scuffed at the edges to look worn in. Even the way he carried himself had changed. His usual confident stride was now more relaxed, less commanding, more like a man who worked with his hands rather than one who sat in a boardroom. His posture, typically straight-backed and assertive, was now looser, his steps slower, as if he had all the time in the world. Marcus Bennett had disappeared. In his place was just another man walking into a dealership, blending into the crowd like he was nobody special. And that was exactly the point. Marcus Bennett had built Bennett Trucks and Motors from the ground up. What started as a small dealership had grown into one of the most recognized truck franchises in the region. Now, he was at a crossroads. He was preparing for major business decisions: expansion, restructuring, and long-term growth. But before he could move forward, he needed to know the truth. The real truth. Not the polished reports from his managers. Not the rehearsed words of employees trying to impress him. And certainly not the fake enthusiasm of customers who suddenly became overly polite the moment they realized they were speaking to the owner. Marcus knew how people acted when the boss was around. Employees straightened up, service magically improved, and suddenly, the dealership seemed to run like a well-oiled machine. But he wasn't stupid. He had been in this business too long to fall for the show. If there were cracks in his company, he needed to see them himself, not through the lens of yes-men and ass-kissing staff. He wanted the raw, unfiltered truth, even if it was bitter, even if it meant hearing things he didn't want to hear. The best way to do that? Go undercover. That's why he had stripped away everything that made him recognizable: the expensive suits, the signature beard, the commanding presence of a CEO. Now, he was just another man. A regular customer walking into one of his own franchises, wearing a simple light blue t-shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers. His face, once framed by a perfectly trimmed beard, was now completely clean-shaven, making him look younger, less like a businessman, and more like a hard-working middle-class guy looking to buy a truck. His watch, once a Rolex, was now a basic rubber-strapped one. Even his posture was different, more relaxed, less intimidating, just another guy blending into the background. This wasn't just a disguise, it was a strategy. By becoming invisible in his own company, he would finally get honest answers. How did employees treat an average customer? Were the salespeople pushy, lazy, or rude? Were the trucks overpriced or worse? Were customers being scammed? Was the service department efficient or full of corner-cutting mechanics? He wanted to know it all. And once he did, he would decide the future of his company, not based on polished reports, but on the truth. Marcus stepped into the showroom of Bennett Trucks and Motors, and the first thing that hit him was the air, cool, crisp, and sterile, pumped through the vents to keep customers comfortable. The space was large, sleek, and designed to impress. Bright overhead lights illuminated the polished floors, reflecting off the chrome grills and glossy exteriors of the trucks on display. The faint scent of new leather and engine oil mixed in the air, the unmistakable smell of freshly detailed vehicles. Lined up in perfect rows were the latest truck models, each one gleaming under the showroom lights. A 2024 Ford F-250 Super Duty, its deep black body almost mirror-like, stood at the center as one of the dealership's premium offerings. To the left, a Chevy Silverado 500ZR2, rugged with oversized all-terrain tires, looked ready for anything. A few feet away, a Ram 3500 Limited, its luxurious chrome accents and extended cab designed for power and comfort, waited for the kind of buyer who wanted both strength and style. Everything looked perfect on the surface, but that wasn't what Marcus was here for. He stepped further in, scanning the room, when a sales rep approached him. The man was white, in his mid-40s, with thinning blonde hair slicked back and deep lines around his mouth that made him look permanently displeased. His blue eyes held none of the warmth a salesman should have, and his expression was unreadable, almost indifferent. He wore a standard dealership polo, tucked too tightly into his slacks, and moved with the stiff, mechanical air of someone who had been doing the job for too long, but didn't care anymore. "Need help?" he asked flatly, his tone as lifeless as his expression. No smile, no enthusiasm, no effort to make a sale. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I'm looking for a new truck." The man didn't even pretend to be interested. He exhaled sharply, barely concealing his impatience, and gave a half-hearted gesture toward the trucks. "Well, you're in the right place. What are you looking for?" Marcus noticed it immediately, the lack of engagement, the absence of that usual sales charm. There was no handshake, no attempt at small talk, no effort to make him feel welcome. Cold, uninviting. Like he was wasting the man's time just by being there, and Marcus hadn't even said what he wanted yet. Something was definitely off in his company, and now, he was about to find out just how bad it was. Marcus glanced at the salesman and gave a small nod. "I'm just going to take a look around," he said. "I'll signal you when I spot something I'm interested in." The man didn't seem relieved or annoyed, just indifferent. "Suit yourself?" he muttered. Marcus decided to test him. "What's your name?" The salesman barely looked at him. "Todd." No last name, no effort to be friendly. Just a clipped response before Todd turned and strolled back toward his desk, as if his job wasn't to sell trucks, but to exist in the same space as them. Shaking his head slightly, Marcus continued to browse the showroom. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as he took in the lineup of trucks before him. The bright overhead lights reflected off the polished hoods, making each vehicle look even more pristine. He had built this from nothing. He had turned his company into one of the most recognizable truck dealerships in the state. Seeing it all in front of him reminded him of how far he had come. But something was wrong beneath the surface. That's why he was here. Then, he spotted it. A 2024 GMC Sierra 1500 Denali Ultimate. A truck that exuded power, status, and unmatched luxury. This wasn't just a truck. This was a statement. With its obsidian black metallic paint, intricate chrome detailing, and 22-inch premium wheels, it was a vehicle built for those who wanted performance, comfort, and an undeniable presence on the road. The hand-stitched leather interior, Bose premium sound system, and head-up display made it feel more like a high-end luxury car than a rugged pickup. It wasn't about necessity. It was about blending in as a wealthy customer, someone with the money and confidence to walk in and buy without hesitation. The kind of man who wouldn't be questioned. As he stood there, studying the truck's features, the showroom doors slid open. Two white men walked in, chatting with each other in low voices. The first man was tall and broad, with short brown hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a dark green flannel shirt, faded jeans, and heavy work boots. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing thick, veined forearms that looked like they belonged to a man who did hard labor for a living. The second man was shorter and leaner, with messy blonde hair and a clean-shaven face. He had on a plain gray t-shirt, slightly wrinkled, along with cargo pants and scuffed sneakers. His walk had a casual, almost lazy air to it, like a man who didn't have to be anywhere in a hurry. Marcus didn't pay them much attention at first, just two regular guys looking for a truck. But then, as they walked past him, they started talking. And the moment Marcus heard what they were saying, he froze. Marcus stood still, his hands resting lightly on the side of the GMC Sierra 1500 Denali Ultimate, his heartbeat steady, but his stomach twisting as the conversation behind him unfolded. "Did you see that?" the brown-haired man muttered, his voice low but not low enough. "Guy like that walking in here like he actually belongs?" The blonde man scoffed. "Yeah. What's he even doing looking at a truck like that? Denali Ultimate? Please. He probably thinks financing means they hand him the keys and forget about the payments." The brown-haired man chuckled. "Nah, more like drive it for a few months, forget the payments, and then play victim when they repossess it." The blonde man leaned against a nearby truck, shaking his head. "You already know what's going to happen. He'll walk around like he's serious, ask a bunch of questions like he knows what he's talking about, then when it's time to talk numbers, it's all, 'I need to check something,' or 'I'll come back later.' Yeah, if he doesn't try to haggle like this, is some flea market?" They both laughed, a low, knowing sound that made Marcus's skin crawl. "And don't even get me started. If he actually buys something. You know how they treat cars. Run it into the ground, never change the oil, then blame the dealership when it falls apart." Marcus took a slow breath, keeping his expression neutral as he stared at the truck in front of him, his fingers curling slightly against the smooth metal. He had heard it all before. The same tired, ignorant assumptions, the same casual racism disguised as everyday conversation. But for now, he stayed calm. He needed to hear more. Marcus was deeply disturbed by what he had just heard, but this was nothing new. He had spent his entire life watching people make assumptions based on the color of his skin, acting as if they already knew his financial status, his habits, and his worth, just by looking at him. It was frustrating, infuriating even. But he had learned long ago that reacting to every ignorant remark would drain him. He wasn't here for their validation. He didn't need it. What he needed was the truth about his company. And that was more important than the racist drivel coming from two men who knew nothing about him. So, instead of acknowledging them, he pushed them out of his mind and focused on why he was here. With a slow breath, he turned and walked toward the sales desk, where Todd was now leaning slightly against the counter, flipping through a brochure like he had nothing better to do. Marcus stopped in front of him and spoke evenly. "I'm interested in the GMC Sierra 1500 Denali Ultimate." Todd barely glanced up. Instead, he looked Marcus over from head to toe, his eyes lingering just long enough to send a clear message. He didn't believe him. Then, without a word, Todd shifted his attention completely to the two white men nearby, giving them a small nod of acknowledgement, as if they were the only real customers in the showroom. Marcus didn't react. He didn't need to. Instead, he stood there, waiting, his face calm, his body relaxed, but his mind taking in every detail. He had expected this, the dismissiveness, the quiet bias, the silent way certain people decided who was worth their time and who wasn't. And yet, even knowing it was coming, witnessing it firsthand in his own company, stirred something inside him. But still, he waited. Because what Todd didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man they had just judged, the man they had ignored, was the very one who had built this place from the ground up. And soon, he was going to show them just how big of a mistake that was. Todd finally turned his attention back to Marcus, but the shift was mechanical, forced. He tried to be pleasant, but the disinterest was clear. His expression remained flat, his tone devoid of any real enthusiasm. He didn't see a customer. He saw a waste of time. The way he glanced at Marcus, eyes scanning him like he was doing quick mental math and coming up short, said it all. Todd didn't think he could afford the truck. Then, with an air of indifference, he muttered, "Wait here while I process the paperwork. Don't take anything. I'll be right back." Marcus felt his breath still for just a second. Don't take anything? Wow. He had expected bias, expected cold treatment, but this? This was worse than he thought. Todd hadn't even tried to hide his assumption. He genuinely believed Marcus might steal something while he was gone. Marcus clenched his jaw. But outwardly, he didn't react. He had mastered that long ago. Instead, he simply nodded and watched as Todd disappeared into the back room, leaving him standing alone. The moment Todd was gone, Marcus could hear the two white men, the brown-haired man and the blonde man, continuing their conversation, their voices low but clear enough for him to hear. "Man, did he just start processing paperwork for that truck?" the brown-haired man scoffed. The blonde man shook his head, smirking. "I see this all the time. Bet you anything that dude doesn't have a regular job." The brown-haired man grinned, leaning against the nearby truck. "Yeah, being able one of those? Probably a dealer or something. You don't buy a truck like that on a 9 to 5. The blonde man let out a short laugh. "Either that or some rapper money." The brown-haired man chuckled, nodding. "Right? Wouldn't be surprised if he throws on some 26-inch rims and calls it a day." Marcus stood still, his fingers grazing the cool metal of the truck's door handle. But inside, he felt a slow, simmering anger curl in his chest. The assumptions, the casual stereotyping, the quiet confidence in their ignorance. It was all so tired. He had worked for everything he had, built a company from the ground up, provided jobs, opportunities, wealth. Yet here he was, being reduced to a stereotype in his own dealership. The laughter cut deep. Marcus had faced racism before, had been judged, dismissed, and underestimated more times than he could count. But something about this moment, the ease with which they spoke, the way they laughed like he was nothing, the way they assumed he couldn't hear them, or worse, that it didn't matter if he did, made his stomach twist. He had told himself he wouldn't react, that he would stay calm and focus on why he was here. But right now, he couldn't keep it in anymore. Why would anyone judge another human being just by their skin color? What gave them the right? If he let this slide, they would just do it again, to someone else. Someone younger, someone less patient, someone who hadn't yet learned to mask the sting of ignorance. Not today. Marcus turned and walked straight up to them. "You think that's funny?" His voice was even, calm, but there was a sharpness in it that made both men stiffen. The brown-haired man blinked in surprise, his smirk faltering for the first time. What?" Marcus kept his eyes locked on them. "The little jokes, the assumptions. You think I can't hear you? Or do you just not care?" The blonde man shifted awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, man, we were just messing around. It's nothing serious, just a joke." Marcus let out a short, humorless laugh. "A joke? You think it's funny to assume I'm a drug dealer because I want to buy a truck? Or that I don't have a job? That's funny to you?" The brown-haired man shook his head quickly, suddenly looking nervous. "Come on, man. We didn't mean anything by it. We were just talking. Didn't even realize you were listening." Marcus tilted his head, his jaw tight. "So, that makes it better? If I didn't hear it, that means it's okay? That's the kind of logic you're working with?" The blonde man put his hands up defensively, his voice turning light, almost pleading. "Look, dude, we're sorry, all right? It was just stupid talk. No harm meant." Marcus stared at them for a long moment, watching them squirm, watching the fake apologies roll off their tongues because they had been caught, not because they were actually sorry. He could tell they didn't think they had done anything wrong. They just wanted to shut him up and move on. But Marcus wasn't interested in their guilt. He wasn't interested in their apologies. He just wanted them to understand. Marcus exhaled slowly, forcing himself to keep his composure. Anger wouldn't fix this, but maybe, just maybe, understanding would. You know, people like me, black men, we don't get the luxury of walking into places like this and just being seen as regular customers, Marcus said, his voice measured. We always have to prove ourselves first. Prove that we can afford what we're looking at. Prove that we're not here to steal. Prove that we belong. He shook his head. You too? You don't ever have to think about that. You can walk in, browse, test drive, and no one will question you. No one will assume you're up to no good. The brown-haired man shifted uncomfortably. Look, man, we didn't mean anything by it. Marcus gave a short nod. Yeah, I know. That's the problem. You didn't think twice about it. That's how deep this runs. You don't even realize the weight of what you say. You joke about my finances, my career, my entire existence like it's entertainment for you. But it's my reality. The blond man sighed and rubbed his hands over his face. All right, man. You made your point. We get it. We shouldn't have said that stuff. The brown-haired man nodded quickly. Yeah, for real. Lesson learned, man. We won't do it again. Marcus studied them for a long moment, gauging whether their words held actual sincerity or just an eagerness to move on. Maybe they really had learned something, or maybe they were just trying to end an uncomfortable situation. Either way, he had said what he needed to say. He nodded. Good. See that you don't. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Just then, Todd walked back into the showroom, holding a stack of paperwork in his hands. His expression was the same, neutral, indifferent, as if he was doing Marcus a favor by even processing the paperwork. He approached the desk, barely making eye contact as he slid the documents across the counter. All right, we'll need a deposit before finalizing anything, Todd muttered, still sounding as uninterested as before. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his black metal credit card, placing it down on the counter without hesitation. Todd barely glanced at it as he grabbed it and swiped it through the machine. The moment the transaction went through, without issue, his entire demeanor shifted. His eyes flickered to the screen, then to Marcus, and back again. A brief moment of disbelief flashed across his face. It was quick, but Marcus caught it. That split second of realization that the nobody he had dismissed could actually afford the truck. Todd cleared his throat, suddenly straightening his posture, his tone noticeably lighter as he handed back the card. All right then, Mr. Marcus. Looks like we're good to go. He forced a smile, his voice now coated with an artificial warmth. I'll have one of our guys bring the truck around for you. You're gonna love this ride. Powerful engine, smooth drive, top-tier features, best in its class, really. Marcus simply stared at him. Now he wanted to be friendly? Now that he knew Marcus had money? The sudden change was almost laughable. Before, Todd could barely be bothered to look at him. Now, he was trying to act like they were old friends. Marcus didn't return the smile. He didn't acknowledge the change in Todd's tone. He didn't need to. He had already seen who Todd really was. Marcus took his card back, sliding it into his wallet without a word. Todd was still smiling, still putting on his new friendly salesman act, acting like the last few minutes hadn't happened. But Marcus wasn't about to let this slide. He needed Todd to know that he saw right through him. He tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Then, in a calm, measured voice, he said, "You don't have to do all that." Todd blinked. Do all what? He let out a forced chuckle, still trying to keep the warmth in his voice. Marcus leaned in slightly, resting one hand on the counter. Pretend. Todd's smile froze, the muscles in his face stiffening. His fingers twitched slightly at his sides, but he quickly forced his hands behind his back, trying to keep his composure. Marcus exhaled slowly, then met Todd's gaze head-on. You think I didn't notice how you treated me when I walked in? How you ignored me to talk to those two instead? How you assumed I couldn't afford the truck? And let's not forget my favorite part, telling me not to take anything while you were gone. Todd's face drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again, as if he was searching for words that wouldn't come. Marcus let the silence hang between them for a moment, watching as Todd shifted on his feet. The salesman was panicking now, his once relaxed posture rigid, his hands fidgeting. He let out a nervous laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Look, man, that's not—" Marcus cut him off. "I'm not man. I'm Marcus Bennett." He let the words sink in before adding, "Owner of Bennett Trucks and Motors. You work for me." Todd's entire body tensed. His breath hitched, his jaw visibly clenched, and the fake friendliness in his eyes shattered. His pupils darted around, as if trying to figure out if this was some kind of joke. But the hard look on Marcus's face told him everything he needed to know. "What? I didn't—" Todd stammered, his voice breaking as he struggled to piece together a sentence. Marcus folded his arms, tilting his head slightly. "Go ahead. Say what you were about to say. I'd love to hear it." Todd's face turned red, his breath uneven. He had been caught. Fully, completely, undeniably caught. There was no way to backtrack, no way to excuse himself, no way to talk his way out of this. And Marcus could see it in his eyes. The sheer, overwhelming terror of a man who had just realized he had disrespected the one person he couldn't afford to. Marcus kept his gaze locked on Todd, watching as panic crept into his eyes. The man who had been so smug, so indifferent just minutes ago, now looked like a cornered animal, desperate for a way out. Marcus let out a slow, measured breath before delivering the final blow. "And effective immediately, you've been fired." Todd's entire body jerked slightly, like he had been physically struck. His mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Then, after a few desperate seconds, he stammered out, "Fired? Wait, no. Come on, man." Marcus cut him off, his voice calm but unwavering. "I came here undercover to see firsthand what was happening in my company. And in less than 1 hour, you've shown me exactly why you shouldn't be working for me." Todd shook his head frantically, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Look, I didn't mean anything, okay? It wasn't personal." Marcus took a step closer, his tone sharper now. "Not personal? You work for a black man, Todd. A black man who gave you a job, a paycheck, an opportunity. And yet, you look down on black customers. Treat them like criminals. Act like they don't belong here. How can you stand in a business owned by a black man, collect money from a black man, and still think like this?" Todd's throat bobbed as he swallowed hard, searching for words, for excuses, for anything that could save him. Marcus didn't give him a chance. "The reform of this company, and the big decisions I need to make for its growth, will start with firing you." His voice never wavered, his decision absolute. "Now get out of my showroom. You don't work here anymore." Todd's face flushed red with humiliation, with anger, with fear. He looked around, as if expecting someone to step in, to defend him. But there was no one. The weight of his actions had finally crashed down on him. With no other choice, Todd turned and walked toward the exit, his steps stiff, his head down. Marcus watched him go, feeling no remorse. This was just the beginning. Marcus watched as Todd disappeared through the showroom doors, his footsteps heavy with defeat. The tension in the air slowly settled, but the weight of the moment remained. He'd achieved a small victory today, exposing one of the many cracks in his company and eliminating a piece of the problem. But he knew this was just the beginning. There were many more to go. Reforming Bennett Trucks and Motors would not be easy. Racism, bias, and complacency had festered in places he hadn't seen, until now. But he had seen enough to know exactly where to start. And he would not stop until his company reflected the values he had built it on. The end. If you believe in justice, equality, and the fight against police brutality, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Together, we can amplify these stories and demand change. Hit that subscribe button now, because not hitting it would mean you want to be silent. I will see you in my next story. The end.